What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to talk about good and bad relationships. I know all you may be having problems, y'all may be having good relationships, so, let's just get into it. Now, first of all, what's a good relationship? And, it's going to take a lot of trial and error. You're going to have a lot of people you go out with, it doesn't go anywhere. And, it all has to do with the chemistry part. So what is the chemistry? Now, this is where you can have two people. They like the way each other look on the outside. No, they are not a good match. And that is a dangerous thing, where somebody is very attached blindly to another person based on their looks. Or they may be telling themselves, this is the best thing that's happened to me, and it is not. So how will we tell? Now, the first thing we got to do is we look at, the kind of connections, and is this person good for the other person? And now what you're going to see is, first of all, people have the infatuation stage, and that's where they release dopamine in the brain. They have this arousal around the other person, and it kind of leads to this kind of a crush or addiction to the other person. Now, as people start sharing experiences together, they start to release oxytocin in the brain, which leads to long-term bonding. But the sex part of the relationship only lasts a short period of time. And eventually, then it has to do with the bond and the connection. And so, there'll be people out there that think they're so attracted to somebody who's just not good for them. So, first of all, it's the connection part. Like, if people are getting along and they share great experiences, but they're constructive for each other, that's a big thing. Now, if you have somebody who's dating somebody who is not good for them, they do not make them feel good, they do not treat them well, that's different. And you can have some women that hate men, but they manipulate guys into a relationship, kind of use them, and then men who kind of use women and kind of manipulate them and kind of run their lives. And so you can have it on both sides. And like where they don't trust each other, so you have a very overly controlling person that kind of wants to know where the other person is. Now that is a creepy side, and that is not a good relationship. Now on the other hand, you can have people that have this deep connection, and they have great experiences together. You put two people together, and it's like an explosive combination. And they both are great complements to each other's personality. Or you may have a very shy person and a kind of more outgoing person. And that person kind of brings the other person out more. Now, on the other hand, if you get somebody who has basically, this naive quality to them, and then you have somebody else who's the opposite, sometimes that can work and sometimes it can't. But you can have a lot of different situations where relationships can go either way. Like, you're going to see, what I'm going to mention now are two types of relationships. You have your ionic and covalent ones, just like chemistry. You have some bonds that are very weak, like hydrochloric acid is hydrogen chlorine. And it immediately dissociates in water to the hydrogen and the chlorine ion. And that's why it's a strong acid, it forms hydronium ions. But in relationships, this is where, you will have two people. It's like, oh my God, he is so hot. Or, oh my God, this person looks great. I just really want to go out with it. And they have this superficial attraction. Now, they may be dating for social status, and the person may fill their life in the short run. But then, you'll have people that'll hook up very quickly, and they'll hate each other's guts the next day and become like a Jerry Springer situation. And so this is where it is very important. You want a good connection, and you want somebody who is good for you. You don't want to have some woman manipulating a guy into being something he's not, thinking, I can't like you the way you are. Like if you see the movie The Zookeeper, he has this woman that will not marry him being a zookeeper. She insists he has to have some other job that is just not her style. And she's trying to push him into something he's not. And then she hooks up with this loser on the internet. Now this is another thing. This loser shoots his mouth off behind computers. And he is constantly trying to push the other guy around because he feels competition. And this is a narcissistic behavior. And now narcissism can complicate relationships. I know y'all meet some people that are stuck up as hell. We're all going to meet some people that just think, oh, you're not cool enough for me, or have an attitude. Now, look on the bright side. A narcissistic person is grossly insecure. They cannot just sit there being themselves. They want to push others around to take attention off from themselves. And this is a trait you will see in adolescence where people are dating for the wrong reasons. They may not hang out with somebody they really like and want to connect with. Instead, they follow their short sword. And now this is another concept in dating, the short sword or blind attraction. They aimlessly like another person who is not good for them. And they'll tell themselves this is a good situation when it's not. And you'll see a lot of that where somebody is wrapped around another person's finger. And then, basically the other person doesn't know what to do with them because one person likes the other better than they do them. And that can create a lot of tension. And so, blind attraction can blind somebody from a better candidate if they're too infatuated with one person who's not good for them. And, good things, people outgrow that, pretty much as they get older. But some people don't. And you'll see that with some celebrities, where somebody will think they are so sexy regardless of how badly they treat somebody. And that is blind attraction. Now, you may have somebody else who has the short sword kind of thing, like there may be a guy that doesn't have a lot of relationship experience that gets played by somebody else. And basically, they are being used, and they are being led into a trap. The other person sees their attraction and immediately goes on it, and immediately puts them to use in their life, kind of uses them. So that's one side. But here's the thing about relationships. Now, what is good? Now, I know a lot of women like guys who can make them laugh. They want security. They want somebody who, they feel good around. That is what leads to the addiction. So there's plenty of other factors, like the connection is important. But besides that, there is spontaneity. Now, what is spontaneous? It's where somebody is interesting and, they enjoy hanging out with them. And they may be sitting in the same room, but the guy can crack jokes about everything. He can make them laugh. He can talk about lots of stuff, have lots of interests. He is not somebody that is boring and easy to see through. But, this is where you can have people that have kind of an assortment of tastes and stuff. And then you can have some people that have just one-dimensional tastes. And this is another issue. Like, if you're on a date, what you want to do is say, dude, I want to eat there. Let's check that out. You know what? I feel like this. Let's go here. And, when the guys take control and they don't just let somebody push them around or try and push them into doing something, that is more of a leader thing. And that brings more security than if somebody is aimlessly agreeing with the other person. And now, on the other hand of security, there's good and bad security. Like, you can have people out there that create conflict. And some people feel that, like tension in a relationship or arguing stuff brings them security. And it's kind of a leader. And that is dangerous. Like, it can go either way. There are men who like tension and women who like tension. It can go on all levels. So that is one thing about it where the security can be bad. But there's also, like you see in Gran Torino, when she's with that dorky guy, and he will not stand up for her when those guys are going to mess with her. He's just like zooming away. He had no idea of the situation or what was going to happen. And he just totally left her in the middle of nowhere, pretty much. That was the biggest turnoff in the world. Now, on the other hand, there's the opposite type of security. And somebody may see somebody they are scared of. And he's just too aggressive and too brutal and too domineering to the point and overbearing and protective. So, that's one factor in relationships. But the thing about it is, like, a lot of women love guys with creativity. Like, why do they like rock stars? Because they create stuff. They have this kind of showmanship and they can entertain them. And they can have this kind of quality where they're very creative and able to create stuff, and they come up with new ideas, and they have that originality, which brings this innovation and makes them think that this guy's a problem solver. And that's what people want. They don't want somebody who's just following stuff. So, on the other hand, are all rock stars sex magnets? No way in hell. There's some of them that look like brain-dead wannabe hot topic goths. They're not even goths. They're trying to be goths. And they try and act like goths to certain people, and then they try and act like rock stars to others, and people see through it. And you can see some rock bands where people try and copy another band. So there's musicians who don't have appeal too. It goes in all levels. And you'll have this kind of quality where somebody leads the other person. And if they can attract them to them, and they can have this bond, and the person becomes bonded to them and has this oxytocin, kind of feels like they're on their mind and lead them, then they'll draw them to them. Whereas if somebody has, they have this short attraction, it will die. And so now the covalent actions tend to be the deeper bonds, whereas the ionic ones tend to be blown out of the water. Like this guy meets this person. The sex is good, according to those two, for the first 2 days. Then all of a sudden he gets blown out of the water by somebody. And so the main thing about this is that they had a deeper connection. They may have been kind of immature the first time, thinking, oh, this person is so hot. And then the term hot is obsolete because people get a deeper bond and they feel this connection. They're sharing their life with them and they have this kind of sense. So, with relationships, you have healthy and unhealthy types of interaction. Now, the flirting part, this is the wild card. Like a lot of people flirt, it's teasing. It can also be insulting somebody or acknowledging them. It's showing some kind of acknowledgement of the other person. And there's also anti-flirting. Like a guy might go to somebody and say, hey, I got you a ticket for this concert, dude. And they're like, okay. And they actually want to go to the concert. And then they never want to go again after seeing this guy bring it up because they don't like that person. And that person somehow brings a bad feeling. Whereas on the other hand, somebody may, and that's anti-flirting. And the other side, somebody has something that the other person hates to do. Absolutely hates to do. But then they like doing it because the other person likes it. And they suddenly get into it through the other person. So that's another side. Like we talk about panty dropper colognes. Now, in base notes in a lot of places, people usually like scents because it reminds me of somebody. Reminds me of a good experience. So this is the comfort and security part, where somebody has a positive reinforcement, kind of brings two people together. Whereas you can have some people that are negative reinforcement. Like one person may love Le Male Cologne, or they may love Body Coros, or they may love Xerius Rohe, or some niche brand. And they may only want to date guys in a certain category. All of a sudden they meet a guy, it's all those categories. And something about him just doesn't come off right. And they don't like the person, and then all of a sudden, it's just not going to work. And there's always situations where things just aren't going to happen, but people tend to, early on, want to have people in the category, or they think this is the category of people I date. But then later on, they kind of outgrow that, and they just meet somebody who blows out of the water. And so that's another trait. Blowing out of the water is a big thing, because if you don't have a relationship, you probably haven't run into enough people. You haven't been in enough places. You may not have met people who were attracted to you or that you had much in common with. Or you may not have had people who were interested. And they may have all had boyfriends, may have had horrible breakups, and then they don't want to talk to anybody else for a while. And so you can have lots of situations that complicate this. Or you can have people that don't know what they want, and they're scared of commitment, or they're scared of being alone, and they're so confused by lots of stuff. And then you get in an adolescent environment. Now, this is the confusing part. And a lot of times we have this pressure. Dude, that person's totally hot. Oh my God, I think they like you. Dude, you're the man. It's kind of like that kind of pressure. And it can totally change a situation. And it can push people in the wrong direction. Rather than letting you connect with people who are good for you and, who you have a connection with. Going out there, trying to look at the image part, or trying to follow your short sword and your blind attraction can actually cause more problems. And so, people in the long run end up finding people who are more like them, or not like them, but they complement their life and bring this sense of comfort. So, let's talk about the comfort, security, and the bonding now. Because you can get two people that are together in an explosive combination. They have this, like one person's creative, the other person is outgoing, and they're kind of creative too, and you put them together and nobody knows what's going to happen. Like you see the zookeeper, and he brings this woman he works with over to the wedding, and it is the best move in the world. And all of a sudden, the woman's that he was in a relationship with kind of broke up with him after he asked her to marry him because she thought, oh, I just can't marry him like that. He brings this woman there, and all of a sudden she brings out the great side in him, and they have a great time. And all of a sudden the woman's got her mind off this loser she met on the internet, and the loser feels even more competition because all of a sudden he's drawing positive attention. Whereas if he was with her, he would have been just some dull guy trying to be something he wasn't. And so it's all about, there can be somebody who brings out a good side and somebody who brings out a dangerous one. And you may have two people that are too much alike that are dangerous. You may have somebody else who's kind of the opposite, and they bring out a good side. But it has to do with lots of factors. And so now we're going to talk real about relationships. Background's real important. Now they talk about top 10 men and women to avoid and stuff like that, but it's a generalization. It's always important you have a good relationship based on, connections and bonding. You don't have somebody who's dangerous for another person. Now, like you have men who are domineering and bossy and ordering somebody around and become the stalker types. You have the liars and cheaters and the dishonest, dirty guys that God knows what you're going to get from. And same thing with women too. A lot of these traits, and you can have people who are very bossy and, maybe the histrionic, I want to be center of the attention kinds of people. And then you may have some narcissistic people have this very opinionated, snobby quality, and you may go, want to go out somewhere or do something, and they're like, no, I don't want to do that. Why the hell are you into that? And they kind of push the other person around like, oh my God, I'm not hanging out with you if you do this. Or I'm not going to hang out with you if you have this job, or they kind of force you into something you're not. Because it's like they got to push other people around to feel better about themselves. And that's one side. Then you have the other types that are the antisocial. And this is where it's not the opinionated snob that just thinks people aren't cool enough for them. This is the person who looks for people as tools and doesn't really bond to them. They're kind of like property. And they have shallow emotions, which is scary. Because if they do become bonded to somebody, they can become like the stalker and the worst nightmare for that person. But those are the kinds of people that are very dishonest, they are very domineering, and they can become very violent and abusive, and they can start to get into a dangerous direction where, they may argue today, they may fight tomorrow, then he might start really beating on them the next day, and then boom, he gets a restraining order and violates it. It starts to escalate. And you can have situations that don't go, that extent, but they still are pretty bad. And so there's men and women who are abusive to spouses. It's not one side. Like you can have people who hate people of the opposite sex on the inside and kind of have this exploitative quality. They seem great in the beginning. They seem like the nicest person somebody met, but then they're vicious and dangerous. And that is one-sidedness. But, the top people to avoid, it basically has to do with, is somebody for you or not? You may have a very bossy person, and then somebody may be a good role model on them. You may have a very narcissistic person who has a lot of talents or something and has something about them that, makes them a good connection for somebody, even though they have that trait. You may have somebody who's a stage hogger, whiner, whatever the Ask Men tries to put in that category. It's okay for somebody and not so bad. And they may not whine so much if they were happy around somebody. They may be kind of neurotic because they may be concerned about something. And those are things people can work on. But when you have people who are dangerous for somebody else, that is the main thing about it. And, in health class, we all talk about this and the self-esteem part. So it's basically, now we're going to talk about another thing. Sex and relationships. Now, there's good and bad sexuality. And that is a very important point that we need to finish this video on. If you think, oh my God, this person's so hot, the sex is good, I love him to death, that is terrible. And you don't know what you're getting yourself into. And you might end up having someone that loves you one day and they hate you the next. Somebody like the guy says, I love you to the other person to get in their pants. And then the other person gets bonded to them and the guy doesn't know what to do with them. And then the guy turns around and is like, okay, this was a one-night thing. And that is antisocial, narcissistic kind of behavior where they are not somebody's friend, they're using them. And so that's a very big thing here. And you will see, on the other hand, where sex is a connection between two people, and it's an experience they share, and that's what it's supposed to be. And so, it's important to have good sexuality, not dangerous self-medication where two people are living for tension and control. And, I've seen many relationships over and over again. You see some that are in that category, and what happens is then you have a tension-oriented situation that just goes downhill and goes to hell. And then two people hate each other's guts and have endless drama trying to get even with each other. And so then they may actually hate and then love and hate and love and have this love-hate relationship between each other. And that is not healthy. And so they may become toxic people that drive away all their friends and everything. So that's one thing about it. So with relationships, do not get into drama for one thing. Gossip is trash. Don't even worry about what other people are doing. And you know what? If somebody doesn't like you for who you are, then the hell with them. Oh well. it's not meant to happen. You will get rejected by some people and be glad you did when you find down the road. It just wasn't going to happen. So, it's important to have the right connection with the right person. And this is